Kingdom, Part 2. Takanuva led Toa Takanuva out of the Colosseum and into the eastern portion of the vast city. Toa Tanma trailed along behind, not saying much. He wasn't sure whether to be grateful another Toa of Light had arrived to help him, or upset that the Turaga didn't think he could handle the job on his own. They arrived at a small, narrow building in an alleyway, not far from the shore. There was no knob or handle on the outside of the front door, nor any carving to indicate who lived there. Takanuva rapped twice with his staff. A small panel opened about halfway up the door. No eyes were visible through it, but a Matoran voice said, "What's the password?" Takanuva looked at the two Toa. "They've lived among us for ages, and still like to play secrecy." Turning back to the door, he said, "This is Takanuva. Open up." "Wrong password. Not even close." "Try this one," said the annoyed Turaga. "I have a troop of Borok with nothing to do. If you'd like, I can have them tear down this building and turn it into a park." There was a pause. Then the voice said, "Close enough," and the door swung open. The three visitors entered a dark hallway, which twisted and turned far more than one would expect, given the size of the building. A door at the end led to a small workshop, cluttered with all sorts of armor, weapons, and other gadgets. A lone Matoran was tinkering with a nasty-looking projectile launcher when they walked in. He looked up at Takanuva, surprised and annoyed. "You know the routine," he said. "Leave your request on the slower side, and we'll get to it." "Yes, I know that's how you Ninra crafters prefer to work," Takanuva replied, making an effort to keep his temper. "But this is a crisis. I have a Toa who needs weaponry." The Matoran looked Toa Takanuva up and down. "Looks like his color scheme could use some work too. But I might just have something here that could be of use." After a few minutes of rummaging through claw catchers, Ratuka launchers, and parts of a Viscerak battle wagon, the Matoran emerged with a twin-bladed lance. He handed it to Takanuva and said, "Now, aim at that far wall. Just use a little bit of power, not even enough to singe the stone." The Toa took the lance, aimed it, and focused on releasing just the tiniest sample of his elemental light. The next instant, a blast of energy blew a hole the size of a Kanoka disc in the wall. "How?" said Takanuva, looking down at the lance. "Most Toa tools just channel power," the Matoran said, smiling. "This one amplifies it. And if that's not enough..." The Matoran searched some more, this time emerging with a launcher. "We don't have a name for this one yet. Too new. Draws light from the environment and fires it as a sphere. It hasn't been tested yet, though." "Fine," said Takanuva. He turned to the two Toa. "I suggest you start right away. There's no telling how much time we have." Once they were back on the street, Tanma wanted to head right for the nearest light barrier, but Toa Takanuva held him up. "There's something I want to do first," said Takanuva. "I want to see Matoro." "That coward!" spat Tanma. "If not for him, we would still have our homes, our universe. You can go see him if you like. I want nothing to do with him." Takanuva expected that Matoro would be living in the region inhabited by the Matoran and Frostalis, but he evidently hadn't been welcome there. Tanma directed his new comrade to an area of what was once Powahi, now home mostly to Skakti. There, in a small hut made of stone, sat Toa Matoro. "What do you want?" the Toa of Ice said, not even looking up at his visitor. "Go away." "Matoro, Takanuva began. "You're needed. You have to come with me." Toa Matoro laughed. It was a bitter sound. "I was needed 10,000 years ago. My destiny was before me, and I hesitated. And the universe died. So don't try to tell me I'm needed now. Just leave me alone. I heard what happened, Takanuva said. But I also know that in your heart, you're a hero. I know how hard you fought on Voyonui, on Mari Nui. And I know if you could have saved the universe, you would have. You would have done anything to do that. Takanuva, overcome with emotion, had to stop talking. Here was Matoro, who was dead in his universe, having sacrificed himself to save Matanui and every other living thing. Here he was, alive, but dead inside, knowing he had failed his people when it mattered most. Matoro looked up at him. Who are you? No one in the kingdom talks about me that way. I'm from another kingdom, Takanuva answered. One where people think of you as a hero. I see, said Matoro. Escaped from an asylum, did you? Okay, said the Toa of Light. You want to sit here and feel sorry for yourself? You blew your chance to be a hero. Well, here's another one. Here's a chance to show everyone you aren't a failure or a coward. Here's an opportunity to bring some honor to your name. Do you have the courage to take it? Why do you care? Asked Matoro. I don't even know you. Maybe I know you, said Takanuva. Or someone very close to you. Now come on, we have a kingdom to save. Tanma was not at all happy to see Matoro along, but there wasn't time for a prolonged argument. Fortunately, the most likely problem spot was in the same area as Matoro's hut. The area around Kini Nui was too well travelled for Rahkshi to have emerged from there unnoticed, but the old bow rock tunnels in Po Wahi were out of the way and largely ignored. If the light barrier in the main tunnel had come down, it would be easy for Makuta to send legions up through those passageways. Why not just block the tunnels? Bring them down? Asked Takanuva. Pohatu and Hugi tried that during the evacuation, said Tanma. The Rahkshi smashed their way through and killed them both before Tahu, Jalar and Kopaka drove them back. No, light was the only effective means of stopping them. Intense light, more than their krater could stand. And they couldn't just, I don't know, dig their way around the barrier? Or use density control and float up through the rock? They could, Tanma agreed, but Honua made sure the ground is warded. Any attempt to dig through it or pass through it, and we'd know. Matoro had said nothing. Takanuva turned and said, What do you think? I think... Never mind, said the Toa of Ice. What he thinks doesn't matter, snarled Tanma. It does to me, Takanuva replied. Tell us, Matoro. Well, what if the barrier didn't go down? What if they've found some way to shield themselves against the light? Then we have a problem, said Takanuva. Cautiously, they started down the tunnel. Even this close to the surface, Takanuva could feel a chill in the air. The only light came from Tanma, who kept up a low level of illumination using his Toa power. We can't go down too far, he said. There's no heat down there, and what air there might still be is foul. Most of the universe is flooded, and a lot of the water has mutagen in it, so whatever did survive the end probably isn't still recognizable. Takanuva glanced at Matoro. Every word that Toa Tanma said was like a dagger in his heart. They had walked perhaps a kio when the tunnel brightened. Tanma pointed ahead to a wall of light in their path. That's the barrier. It's still intact. So the problem isn't here. Mangaya, maybe? Or some other access point we don't know about? Perhaps, said Takanuva. But what if Matoro's right? What if the barrier simply isn't stopping them anymore? I don't have time for Matoran myth, said Tanma. We have to check other possibilities. Are you coming or not? Takanuva glanced at the barrier, at Matoro, and then back at Tanma. Alright. The two Toa of Light started back up the tunnel. Neither noticed Matoro wasn't following until they heard the sound of ice blasts coming from behind them. Takanuva turned and ran back down, followed closely by Tanma. There was Matoro, battling 4 Rahkshi on his own. Behind them, more were breaching the barrier, each clad in armor made of deep shadow. The armor couldn't survive the passage through the barrier, dissolving not long after making contact with the light. But it lasted just long enough to get the Rahkshi through to the other side. Takanuva and Tanma both dropped to one knee and opened fire with their light powers. Takanuva's power lance took out 2 Rahkshi, while Tanma drove a third back into the barrier, where its crater burned to ashes. Matoro froze the 4th in a block of ice up to its head, just long enough to reach in and yank out its crater. He threw the squirming creature on the ground and stepped on it.
"Excellent,"
said a soft, sinister voice, which seemed to come from every shadow. Takanuva knew it well. It belonged to the Makuta of Metru Nui, the leader of the Brotherhood.
"I see that at least one of you has an imagination. Matoro, my old friend. It seems like yesterday we were teamed against the Baraki and their hordes."
"You," said Matoro, his voice shaking. "Why aren't you dead? So many others died. Why not you?"
"What is there left when the light dies, Toa? Darkness. Only darkness,"
Makuta replied.
"And I thrive in the dark. Oh, my brothers perished one by one. Icarax was the first, driven from his body by my attack so I could possess it. His essence left to die in the cold of the void. But my hatred will not let me die. Hatred of Matanui. Hatred of all who escaped the end of this universe. Most of all, Matoro, hatred of you. You turned away from your destiny. Matanui was meant to cheat death. Instead, I was cheated of my revenge."
Now, the Toa heard a clanking of armor, as if a colossus were coming toward them. The next moment, a 20-foot giant, clad in shadow armor, erupted from the barrier. As the shroud of shadow fell away, they could see their foe. He was a bizarre amalgam of the Makuta who had attacked Kardanui and others who were unfamiliar. He was a monstrosity, now truly as ugly on the outside as his spirit was within.
"As my brothers were about to die, I absorbed them into my body,"
said Pterodax.
"I used their mass to grow. I used their knowledge to create armor to pierce this barrier. And now your kingdom will surrender, or it will suffocate in a sea of shadow."
Tanma, Matoro, and Takanuva attacked. Bolts of ice and spears of light rained on Pterodax's armor, but the damage was negligible.
"I have had 10,000 years to prepare for this battle,"
the Makuta hissed.
"You cannot win."
"Excuse us if we try," said Takanuva, blasting with his power lance directly at the Mask of Shadow. The blow knocked the mask off. Makuta bent to retrieve it, but Tanma was too fast, hitting it with full power and melting it to slag. "Tanma, get back!" Takanuva shouted. It was too late. Makuta had scooped up the Toa of Light like a toy and triggered the shattering power of a pan-rock. Takanuva had to look away. It was simply too horrible to watch.
"Now do you see?"
said Makuta.
"You must..."
Makuta stopped dead. Then he smiled at Takanuva.
"Oh, I see. Oh, how intriguing. You are from somewhere else. Somewhere where Matoro died and Matanui lived. The plan proceeds there to its inevitable conclusion. Did you flee then, Takanuva? Did you have the wisdom to escape before my reign begins?" "I died?"
said Motoro quietly. "Yes," Takanuva replied. "You did. You gave your life so billions could live. In my universe, you are considered the greatest hero ever to bear the title of Toa."
"And here you are just one more insect to be crushed,"
said Makuta, advancing.
"Perhaps there is some other use for you. The Mask of Life still exists, and you were connected to it. You have knowledge I can use, Toa of Ice."
A hand made of shadow emerged from Makuta's chest, heading right for Matoro. Takanuva made a move to get between them, but the Toa of Ice hit him with a barrage of ice shards, driving him back. "Matoro, what are you doing?" Takanuva cried out. "He's going to kill you!" "I should have died 10,000 years ago," Matoro said. He stood erect, hands at his sides, waiting for the hand to seize him. "I should have saved everyone, but I didn't. If you think about it, Takanuva, neither of us is meant to be here." The shadow hand took Matoro in its grasp and drew him, unprotesting, into the substance of Makuta. Takanuva got to his feet, bursting light from his power lance and shadow from his other hand, screaming, "Murderer!" Strangely enough, Makuta did not counterattack. In fact, the Colossus actually looked a bit unsteady on his feet. He took a step back, reached out an armored hand to support himself, then dropped to his knees. Both hands went to the sides of his head as he shouted,
"No! I must prevail! I am the stronger! I am..."
Then another voice came from Makuta's mouth. It was Matoro's. "No, Makuta! You once told the Toa Mata that you could not be destroyed because you were nothing. You are wrong. It is because you are nothing that I can destroy you. You have no heart, you have no spirit, you have no reason to exist. Even your hate is a pale reflection of what once burned in you. You survive out of habit, monster, and habits and minds can be broken!" The scream that came from Makuta then was long, loud, and strangely hollow. An instant later, the giant collapsed to the ground and lay unmoving. Takanuva edged closer and confirmed what he already knew. Makuta was dead. Just to be sure, he used his power to send searing light to every corner of the tunnel, but there was no sign of the Master of Shadow's antidermis. He had not escaped this final confrontation. Takanuva pondered for a long time as he went back up to the surface. Jiraiya Vakama had once told him that when a Makuta absorbs a body, he must crush the will of his victim immediately. Otherwise, he risks other minds intruding upon his own. Matoro had heard the same tales. He had known if Makuta absorbed him, he could fight back from within. At one time, such an effort would have been impossible. Makuta's will would have been too strong. But Matoro had been right. Makuta truly had nothing to live for. He survived and plotted his vengeance, but it was a hollow pursuit. He had lusted for a control of a universe, only to see that universe destroyed. And there was no place for him in the kingdom. Takanuva would tell the ruling council what had happened down below, and warn them to beware of any other Rahkshi who might still lurk below, clad in shadow armor. He would stay long enough to see a statue erected of Matoro, the Toa who had been granted that rarest of commodities, a second chance to make things right. Turaga Takanuva would ask his Toa counterpart to stay, even knowing what the answer would be. In the end, the Brutaka of this universe would use his Kanohi Olmec to send Takanuva back into the space between dimensions, on his journey to Karda Nui. There was much to be done, and still a very long way to go. The end.